back with part 3 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible Tree of Life version, TLV, and we are reading Numbers, chapters 25 through 36, and I had to pause it because I wasn't sure. Sometimes this online voice recorder, it shows the counter at the minutes that I'm actually recording this. Sometimes it is not working properly, and it definitely was not with part 2. I mean, we were quickly heading to close to 18 minutes, and I don't know what it'll end up being when it actually gets uploaded to YouTube and GodTube, but it was like 17.41 or so. So we'll see what it's like when it gets uploaded. It should be fine though. There was a little bit more interference with part 2. It sounds like I'm in a wind tunnel a little bit, so please bear with that. And I hope this is a lot clearer. So now I know we have plenty of time to continue with chapter 28. We're going to talk about Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. And we talked about these appointed times, these Moedim, in the book of Leviticus. So this is not something that you haven't heard before, because we actually talked in more detail back in the book of Leviticus. But this is just in addition to what they're to do with the offerings, what B'nai Israel how they were to offer to Adonai. So on the 15th day of the 7th month, you are to have a sacred assembly. You are not to do any of your work, and you are to celebrate the feast to Adonai for 7 days. You are to offer a burnt offering by fire to Adonai as a pleasing aroma, 13 young bulls from the herd, 2 rams, and 14-year-old male lambs without defects. Their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah, with each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 with each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 with each of the 14 lambs, plus 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offering. I had to pause for a minute there. I was losing my voice. Sorry about that. On the 2nd day, you are to offer 12 young bulls from the herd, 2 rams, and 14-year-old male lambs without flaw, with their grain and drink offerings, with the bulls, rams, and lambs as appropriate by their number according to the regulations, plus 1 male goat as a sin offering, as well as the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. On the 3rd day, offer 11 bulls, 2 rams, and 14-year-old male lambs without defect, with their grain and drink offerings, with the bulls, rams, and lambs, and the number specified, in a male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain and drink offerings. On the 4th day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, and 14-year-old male lambs without flaw, their grain offerings and drink offerings, with the bulls, rams, and lambs by their number according to their regulations, and 1 male goat as a sin offering, and the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. On the 5th day, 9 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male 1-year-old lambs without defect, with their grain and drink offerings by their number as specified, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain and drink offerings. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment because you can see at one point they're wanting Adonai is saying 14, like on the 4th day, there were 14-year-old male lambs. Then on the 5th day, it's 14 male 1-year lambs. So there's different specifications for different days. On the 5th day, nine bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male 1-year-old lambs without defect, and their grain and drink offerings for their number as specified, and 1 goat for sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offerings with its grain and drink offerings. On the 6th day, 8 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs a year old without defect, with the bulls, rams, and lambs, their grain and drink offerings, according to those numbers specified, and 1 goat for a sin offering with the regular burnt offering and its grain and drink offerings. On the seventh day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs without defect, a year old, plus their grain and drink offerings for the bulls, rams, and lambs, according to the numbers specified, in addition to 1 male goat for a sin offering, and the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. On the 8th day there shall be for you an assembly. You are to do no regular work. You are to offer to Adonai a burnt offering, a fire offering, a pleasing aroma, 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs a year old without defect, and their grain and drink offerings with the bull, ram, and lamb corresponding to their number according to the regulations, and a goat for sin offering besides the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. You are to prepare these for Adonai at your Moedim, meaning at the appointed times, in addition to your vow and free will offerings, along with your burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offering, and fellowship offerings. So Moses told Bani Israel all that Adonai commanded Moses. So just to recap chapter 28 and 29, the daily burnt offerings discussed in the offerings on the Sabbath, offerings at the new moon, and the feast of, of unleavened bread, Pesach first, which is Passover, and unleavened bread, the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles, and the offerings was this was all established. All of the 7 commanded feasts of God. And the daily burnt offering was to be continual. There were specific instructions to be done for each of these offerings. Chapter 30, keeping or nullifying vows. This is a pretty important topic because vows are very important depending on what vows that you make. And we're gonna read how some of B'nai Israel in the future will make vows, and some of them you want to scratch your head and say, "Oh, why would he do that?" As we get into the books of history, there's some of the prophets actually. There's a particular prophet that we will address when we get to it. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you who. So, keeping or nullifying vows, Moses spoke to the princes of the tribe of B'nai Israel, saying, "This is what Adonai has commanded." And we're going to also begin Parashat Matot, Matot. Whenever a man makes a vow to Adonai or swears an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he is not to violate his word, but do everything coming out of his mouth. Be careful what you speak, especially if you're making a vow, in other words, because it should be sacred and you should be keeping your word. Suppose a woman in her youth vows to Adonai or obligates herself by a pledge in her father's house. If her father should hear her vow or her pledge, which with which she obligated herself, and her father says nothing to her, all her vows and every pledge by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if her father should forbid it on the day of his hearing it, none of her vows or pledges by which she has obligated herself will stand. Adonai will forgive her because her father has forbidden her. Suppose she should marry after her vow or a rash promise of her lips by which she obligated herself. Now, if her husband hears about it but says nothing to her on the day he hears about it, her vows will stand and her pledges by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if her husband should hear about it on the day he hears it, he forbids it, he thereby nullifies her vow and her rash promise by which her lips have obligated her, and Adonai will forgive her. Any vow or obligation of a widow or a divorced woman will be binding on her. If in her husband's house she vowed or obligated herself by pledge under oath, and her husband should hear it and say nothing to her, not forbidding her, all her vows and every pledge by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if her husband should nullify them on the day when he hears of them, nothing from her lips whether vow or pledge will stand. Her husband has nullified them, and Adonai will forgive her. Her husband may ratify or veto any vow or sworn oath to deny herself. But if her husband says nothing to her from day to day, then he is confirming all her vows and all her oaths that are on her. He confirms them by saying nothing to her on the day of his hearing about it. But if he nullifies them after hearing about it, he will bear her guilt. These are the statutes that Adonai gave to Moses relevant to relationships between a man and his wife, as well as between a father and his young daughter still living in his house. So to recap that, the laws about vows are addressed here. If a man vows a vow unto the Lord, he is not to break his word. If a woman vows a vow in her father's house and he hears her vow, she is bound by that vow. But if the father does not allow the vow, then the Lord shall forgive her of this because the father did not allow it. The same occurs when she marries and her husband would disallow. Every vow of the widow and divorcee is to be kept and held against her if she breaks the vow. God was making it clear that if making vows, in making vows, not to take them lightly because they are sacred to the Lord. Marriage vows are one of those things that are sacred to the Lord because you're taking vows. Chapter 31. I'm not sure I might have to pause. We're already at, and I think the counter is correct this time. So I may have to pause it to finish chapter 31, but we're going to try to get through as much of chapter 31 as we can. Vengeance on Midian and Balaam. Remember Balaam and the donkey. Okay. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Take vengeance on the Midianites for Bani Israel. Afterward, you will be gathered to your people. In other words, afterwards, Moses is going to die. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, Mobilize some of your men for battle. They will go out against Midian to carry out Adonai's vengeance on Midian. Sent into battle 1,000 men from each of the tribe of Israel. So from the thousands of Israel, 1,000 from each tribe were assigned, 12,000 in all. Moses sent them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, and with them Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the Kohen, who took with him articles from the sanctuary and trumpets for signaling. They fought Midian just as Adonai had commanded Moses and killed every male. Among the slain, they also killed the Midianite kings, Avi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with a sword. So this is where Balaam actually ended up dying. The one that we spoke about earlier in Numbers. Bnei Israel also captured women and sons of Midian along with all of their herds and flocks and plundered all their goods. They burnt with fire all the Midianite cities, settlements, as well as all their camps. They seized all the plunder and all the spoil, both people and animals. They brought the captives, plunder, and spoils to Moses, Eleazar the Kohen, and to the assembly of Bnei Israel at their camp and on the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. Moses, Eleazar the Kohen, and all the princes of the community went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands, the commanders of hundreds, those returning from the campaign of the war. Moses said to them, You let all the women live? Why, they are the ones, because of Balaam's advice, who caused Bnei Israel to be unfaithful to Adonai in the matter of Peor, so that the plague was on the community of Adonai. So now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has been intimate with a man, but save for yourself every girl who has not been intimate with a man. Any of you who has killed anyone or touched the body of anyone who has been killed must stay outside the camp for 7 days. You must purify yourself on the 3rd and 7th days. You and your captives also purify every item of clothing as well as every item made of leather or wood. Eleazar said to the men of the army who had gone to war, This is the regulation of the Torah Adonai gave to Moses. The gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, lead, and anything able to pass through fire is to be put through the fire and will then be clean. It is also to be purified with the water of cleansing. Anything that cannot stand the fire is to be put through the water. You are to wash your clothes also on the seventh day. You will then be clean and may then come into the camp. Adonai said to Moses, saying, count the total spoil from the captive people and animals, you, Eleazar the Kohen, and the princes of the fathers of the community. You are to divide the spoil between those fighting in the war, taking part in the battle, and the rest of the community. You are also to set apart from the men of war going into battle tribute to Adonai. One item from every 500, whether persons, cattle, donkeys, or flock, from their half share. Take and give it to Eleazar the Kohen as Adonai's part. From the half of Bnei Israel you are to take 1 in 50, whether persons, cattle, donkeys, flock, or any other animals, and give them to the Levites, those charged with the care of Adonai's tabernacle. So Moses and Eleazar the Kohen did just as Adonai commanded Moses. The remaining plunder taken by the people of the army was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and from the human spoil were 32,000 women who had never been intimate with a man. The half share of those going into battle was 337,500 sheep, of which Adonai's tribute was 675, 36,000 cattle, of which Adonai's tribute was 72. 30,500 donkeys, of which Adonai's tribute was 61, 16,000 persons, of which the tribute to Adonai was 32. Moses gave the tribute, Adonai's part, to Eleazar the Kohen, just as Adonai had commanded Moses, from the half belonging to Bnei Israel, which Moses had set apart from that of the fighting men, half belonging to the community, which was 337,500 of the sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, 16,000 persons. From this half Moses took 1 out of every 50 persons and animals, as Adonai had commanded him, and gave them to the Levites, those charged with the care of the tabernacle of Adonai, just as Adonai had commanded Moses. Then the officers over the units of the army, the commanders over thousands and hundreds, came to Moses. They said to him, your servants have counted the heads of the men of war under our command, and not one is missing. So we have brought as an offering to Adonai the gold items each of us acquired, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces, to atone for ourselves before Adonai. Moses and Eleazar the Kohen received the gold from them. All the crafted items, all the gold presented as a gift to Adonai came to 16,750 shekels from the commanders of thousands and hundreds. Each of the men of the army had taken plunder for himself. Moses and Eleazar the Kohen received the gold from the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial from Bnei Israel before Adonai. So that is the end of chapter 31. And to recap that, Moses is told to avenge the children of Israel of the Midianites, and there was a war with the Midianites, and the kings of Midian were killed. The men, the women, and children were taken as captives when they were actually told to kill everyone. Actually, and this is why Moses was angry with the army. So they took also the cattle, the flock, and the flocks and goods. They burned all of their cities. They took spoil. They brought captives and the prey and spoil to Moses. In the second part of this chapter, we see how Moses is angry with the officers because no one was to be spared, as I said, and they had some men, women, and children, and Moses ordered them all killed except the women and children that had not been known by a man. They could keep them alive for themselves. They were then to purify themselves and their captives and their raiment, and he instructed them on purification. The last part of the chapter spoke about the division the prey and the booty, they also called it booty, that was taken from the Midianites. So we're going to pause this and come back with chapter 32.